Her element isn't fire. She's the master of amber, the power of absorption. She can emulate the power of anyone she's touched. Sensei Garmadon to Jay. Hello, I'm Sensei the Dark Master, and in today's installment of Ninjago lore, we shall be covering another elemental power. This time it's Amber. We shall be covering its history, those people and objects that have wielded the powers that it grants upon its user, the colors and other traits associated with it, and its weaknesses. As always, let us start with the history of the element. Surprisingly, the elemental power of Amber was not created by the first Spinjitzu master. Instead, its origins are much more recent. The first elemental master of Amber started out as an envious, dishonorable Medallonian blacksmith. Over time, he grew jealous and envious of the elemental master's powers. Inspired by an old, gnarled tree that grew nearby, it had a strange power. See, it had mythical amber that could not only capture bugs, but also people or even pure energy. With this knowledge and his proficient blacksmithing skills, this guy created the first chrono steel to absorb fragments of elemental powers. He channeled them into a jar called the Urn of Enmity, and thus, from all that, created the elemental power of Amber. After a lifetime of evil involving stealing other people's powers, the first elemental master of Amber was confronted by the sons of the first Spinjitzu master, Wu and Garmadon, who had not yet become evil at that point. In a desperate last-ditch move, he tried to use the urn once more to steal what powers the two brothers had gotten from the first Spinjitzu master. But the urn itself had grown hungry. It betrayed him and sucked his spirit inside. The brothers, sensing that this was an appropriate punishment, put the urn into his burial spot. At some point, the elemental power of Amber was passed to his kid, presumably before his imprisonment. After a period of time that constructed, I can only assume, a moderate number of generations, Skylar's unnamed mother inherited the power of Amber. She, at some point, married the less than well-intentioned man who would become Master Chen. The pair would have a daughter, and shortly afterwards, Skylar's mother would disappear, leaving the pair alone. Eventually, Skylar unlocked her powers and joined her father's Anacondrai Cult. She would, for a time, help her father in his nefarious goals involving the Tournament of the Elements. However, eventually she was won over by Kai and the other ninja and helped them defeat her evil father and his cult. Sadly, she would, in the end, ironically help her father, who used her amber to achieve his goals of taking the elemental powers and using them to activate the Anacondrai transformation spell, which transformed him and all who bore the tattoo of the Anacondrai into invincible Anacondrai warriors. Skylar would fight against her father in the Battle of the Corridor of Elders, though in the end it was Garmadons Sacrifice that saw her father and his army banished to the Cursed Realm for their betrayal. During the possession season, she would take over her father's family business, though she didn't actively assist in fighting off all the ghosts. She also made a brief appearance in the Hands of Time, when she and Kai discussed the nature of evil parents and how one can outgrow their influence. Amber and Skylar would take on a more active role in Hunted when she helped Lloyd's resistance movement against his father, Lord Garmadon, and his nefarious biker gang, the Sons of Garmadon. She even managed to copy Garmadon's destruction elemental essence, and for a time temporarily controlled the Colossus, though she was poisoned and rendered temporarily unresponsive due to its sheer power and corrosiveness. She would help the ninja against the Oni, and would only further help the ninja against their many foes. Now that the history is covered, let us discuss the people and objects that have wielded this thieving power. First, there was the original Master of Amber, who was a cruel man who would even attempt to steal Skylar's power in some point. Then there was Skylar's mother, who was the former elemental Master of Amber. We're never really going to learn much about her, though. And most prominently, of course, there is Skylar, the current elemental Master of Amber. Via the Staff of Elements, two more people have used the Amber in a far more obscure manner. This includes Master Chen when he was fighting Lloyd, and surprisingly Kai when he temporarily went mad with the power of the staff. In terms of objects/materials, obviously the Staff of Elements is the most prominent, as it did contain amber as well as all the other elements during the Tournament of Elements. Then there is the Urn of Enmity, which was a plain jar that could contain not only the powers of people, but also the souls of the departed. Then there was the Whirlwand, which, being forged with amber, contained a weak power of wind. Also, both Blue Crystal and Chrono Steel were believed to have been created by the original Master of Amber and thus have been imbued with the power of Amber, meaning technically the Staff of Elements already had the power of Amber in a sense before it ever absorbed anyone's elemental powers. Now that we have covered the users and objects that have had the power of Amber, what about the powers that the element of Amber grants upon a user? Well, let's cover them now. Most obvious is the elemental replication, which allows a user to absorb and replicate the powers of other elemental masters via physical contact. It has 5 sub-powers that are contained within it. Via ability training, the user can replicate other people's powers or abilities simply by learning how to use them. Via attack recording, the user can gather/record an attack from an opponent and use that attack at their own usage. When recording the attack is negated in the process, and once a user has recorded the attack, they may be able to use that attack as many times as they need or want to. With elemental combination, a user can combine the elemental powers they have gathered to help attack or escape from enemies. And with power shifting, a user can switch/shift their power from one power to another to match the super being they're facing. In some cases, the user has inherent abilities that can dramatically be different from one to another and can thus easily shift from one to the next. The element of amber is associated with primarily the color orange, though maroon/red is a secondary color. The symbol of amber is the Mandarin symbol, which means 6. Honestly, it's one of the weaker symbols in that it's a literal symbol, a letter, as opposed to an intricately designed icon like those of some other elements. In terms of weaknesses, users of Amber can only keep an element for a certain amount of time before it fades, though this seems to vary depending on the element. Also, the elemental essences cannot be controlled as easy. In fact, if Skylar was to touch the first Spinjitzu master, she'd probably explode. For example, when Skylar got sick when utilizing the destruction elemental essence, this was because it literally poisoned her. Also, elemental combination has a greater strain of usage. Well, what can we learn from the power of Amber? Well, we learn the gift of generosity, and we are warning that envy and spite can only lead to suffering and ill ends. I'm Sensei the Dark Master, and join me next time in the lore of Ninjago. Have a wonderful day and subscribe if you want more content like this. See you later.